Hello and welcome to UPSC History Optional. Today we are going to talk about a very important theme in the ancient Indian history. It is often even asked in the UPSC mains examination that how Vedas and sometimes the question is also on Puranas, how they act as a source of Indian history. So there is a perception in the common people that Vedas and Puranas are some kind of mythological and uh, kind of texts and which do not reflect the true picture of history. This is true to some extent. Large portions of Vedas and Puranas do contain the religious rituals and the mythology, which may not uh, uh, project the history. But there is a new concept of history that is called embedded history, as propounded by Professor Romila Thapar, and you can quote it in your exam also. So, what is embedded history? Embedded history is that history is not always the way it is written, not always the way it was written in the West. In the West, it was written in the form of a proper political history. But in the Indian tradition, we have a tradition of stories and myths and tales. But they have, although they are not directly as such written about history, but from those stories and tales and mythology, we get a timeline, we get a socio-economic background, we get a geographical extent, we get the idea of the seasons, etc. So we can derive proper history even from these texts. So as such, Vedas do provide us a lot of important insights into the history, and Puranas are even more important from the point of view of even the proper history. So I'll discuss in a very short video crisply. I'll give you some important points which you can directly write in your examination. So let's start with the Vedas. First of all, Vedas provide us the geographical details of the Vedic times. For example, in the early Vedic period, there is a lot of mention of the Sapt Sandhava region, which is basically the Punjab and the today's Afghanistan region. And it is considered to be the region where the early Vedas were composed. But as we see the later Vedas, there is lesser and lesser mention of the Sapt Sandhava region, and there is more mention of the Gangetic plains and the Aryavrata region. So it signifies that with time Vedic people moved eastwards into the today's Uttar Pradesh, etc. Also, there is a mention of the Madhya Desha and Dakshin Patha, which became a very important trade routes during the Mahajanpada period, and Mathura and these cities emerged on these routes. Even the south, Pratisthana, etc., from where these Andhras or Satavahanas ruled. Also, there is a Nadi Stuti in the Vedas where more than 25 rivers have been mentioned. Rivers like Kubja, which is today's Kabul River in Afghanistan. There is this Vitasta and other rivers which are the tributaries of the Sindhu Indus River. Then there is the mention of political history and structure. For example, Vedas mention the Battle of Haryappu, which is considered a battle of 10 kings, and some historians like Mortimer Wheeler says that this is the battle where the Vedic people decisively defeated the Harappan people and took the control of the Harappan area. But of course, there are many different opinions on this matter. But still, overall, this is a historically significant battle of 10 kings that took place. Similarly, the political structure of the Vedic times, such as Sabha, Samiti, and their political structure, the Rajas, etc., these things were properly mentioned. Thereafter, we get the socio-economic history. We get to know the role that women played in the Vedas. For example, we are aware from the Vedas that the many female Vedic deities were जिनकी पूजा की जाती थी, Aditi, Nisha, etc. Similarly, there are many women who contributed to the formation of the Vedic hymns, such as Lopamudra, Gargi, etc. So we get to know that the women had a role to play in the society during the early Vedic times. However, unfortunately, we also come to see that the women's position started to degrade in the later Vedic times, And it is mentioned in one of the Upanishads that women were started to be prevented from even getting birth. So we get to know not only the history of women in the society, but also the changing perception of women in the society in the Vedas. So these are the main points. There can be others, but these are the chief ones. You'll get 4 to 5 points to write in your examination from this. This was about Vedas. We will come to Puranas in a while, but first let me give you a critique of this. Question can also be asked, what is the problem of deriving history from Vedas? Or why Vedas cannot be treated as a source of history? Or what are the limitations of Vedas as a source of history? There we are going to write, number one, dating of these sources is very vague. And even after so many years of research, a proper or agreed conclusion about the Vedic origins and the time period that Vedas represent has not been arrived. So, number one, it is very vague if you see the time wise. Then it is said by Professor Upinder Singh that Vedas and Puranas were written in a very narrow social context. These are primarily Brahmanical texts, and we are not totally aware if these texts speak for all sections of the society. It is also likely, and some say that it's quite probable, that these texts only represent a very small part of the society at that point of time. So they may not be that inclusive. It is also. Then they are written from a religious and not historical point of view. So there is a constant tendency to exaggerate, etc. For example, there is a famous debate wherein many grand palaces, etc., are projected in Vedas, but we find no archaeological source corresponding to the Vedic claims. In fact, it has come as a question also in the previous year questions that Vedas do not have archaeological sources to back their literary claims. So, also all the Vedas were not written at the same point of time. Some Vedas were written earlier, some were written later. So their overall dating becomes a major problem. Now let us come to the Puranas. There are more than 100 Purans. Out of them, 18 are the major Purans called Mahapuranas, and others are the minor Purans, also called Upapuranas. So Puranas also act as a even more important source of history than the Vedas. There is a reason behind this. There are Hindu Puranas, there are Jain Purans. Jain Purans such as Adi Puran gives the life story of Rishabh Deva and other Jaina saints. If you closely recall, in the UPSC prelims examination of 2023, a question was asked about the Puranas related to Jains. Even I did that question. Similarly, Puranas give very amazing conception of time. For example, Yuga, Mahayuga, Kalpa, Manvantras, and so on. They also propound Satyuga, Dwapar Yuga, Kali Yuga, etc. So this conception of time given in the Puranas is very indigenous and quite mind-blowing. Thereafter, let's come to the main points. One is political history. You have to, in your exam, you have to give more emphasis on these 6 Puranas when you are mentioning about the Puranas as a source of history. They are Brahma Puran, Vayu Puran, Vishnu Puran, Bhishya Puran, Bhagavat Puran, and the Matsya Puran. These Puranas provide a chronological political history of the ancient kings. Even if you see the Kalhan and his Rajatarangini written in the 13th century, he also derives from the Puranas. The total genealogy of the kings, right from the times of Ashoka and even earlier, up to the 12th or 13th century. So Puranas consist of those genealogies. They refer to dynasties such as Harinkas, Shishunagas, Nandas, Mauryas, Shungas, Kanvas, Andhra, etc. Similarly, Vishnu Puran deals specifically about the Mauryas, Matsya Puran deals about Satavahanas, and Vayu Puran about the Gupta. Moreover, the Puranas also mentioned a dynasty called Nagas. The mention of Nagas is seen nowhere else but only in Puranas. So, hence, similarly, like we discussed in the Vedas, Puranas also indicated the geographical history of their times. For example, Markandeya Purana throws lights on geographical regions such as the Vindhya mountains and Narmada Valley, etc. Similarly, they also point out to the social history of their times and the urbanization. In urbanization, important urban centers such as Mathura, Koshambi, etc., all are mentioned again and again. Shravasti is mentioned again and again. In the social realm, the Varna system, the treatment of women, untouchables, etc., is mentioned in the different Puranas. Similarly, there is a famous theory, this Aryan migration theory. Puranas say about this theory that Aryans started from Pratisthana, and thus they emphasize upon the indigenous origin of Aryan's theory. As we will discuss in some other video, that there are many opinions about how Aryans came to be in India. Some scholars say that they come from outside. This includes Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Some say that they were the indigenous people. So one of the Puranas mentioned the indigenous origin of the theory. Similarly, Agni Puran and Garud Puran also deal in many secular topics such as astronomy, grammar, medicine, etc. So, and wherever we see a mention of Puranas, you can also always refer to Professor Romila Thapar, who said that Puranas present the embedded form of history, which is a rather new form of history compared to the political history that was written by first the earlier Romans and then the modern European people. So today this is it. These are the main points that we can write in the examination. Points can be many more, but with the limited scope of it that we have in the exam, this much is enough. Stay tuned for more.